So I'm going to walk you through each of the three comps that I've presented, and let's start with this first one. You'll notice at the bottom of each of the three comps there's a series of adjectives, and they're different for each one. So this particular style tile takes the approach of presenting NERRA's personality as being warm, accessible, friendly, and earthy. And you'll find that the elements on the page work to support those adjectives. So for example, the color palette here has a lot of the earth tones and sort of just the natural colors of the NERRA sites as landscapes, and just the surroundings there. Another texture that could be used to support that sort of earthy, approachable, warm feeling is to take a watercolor pattern and fill various imagery with it. So this picture happens to be of some, flowers and leaves and things, and that watercolor texture has that earthy essence that I'm trying to capture with this personality. The thing that something like this could function as is, yes, it's got this decorative element, the watercolor pattern and whatnot, but it would only be used in cases where we might have a statistic or a fact that would lay on top of it. So it would act as a secondary element, and it would be, not overly used. You wouldn't see it all over the place. It would be much more strategic. So I just want to kind of point that out so you're not picturing a complete, overly illustrated site. Content is definitely king, so any of the design elements you see would be made to enhance the content and not necessarily overpower it or, dominate. The photography that we would use, this is sort of an example of that, eye contact being made of this person happens to work at NERRA. I'm sure you guys know her. Anyway, I found this picture and thought that, it accurately captures what we're kind of hoping to go for with this site, rather than, the back of heads and that kind of thing. You're actually engaging with the people who use and work at the various reserves. Down here is another possible texture where natural fiber paper could be used as a layering element, and again, only to support relevant content that would sit on top of it. And you see there's sort of a transparency box here, so there's again that sort of depth and layering and interest that can pull your eye around the page, whatever the page happens to be. Another example of, a landscape from one of the reserves and possibly a call out in a soft, rounded, this happens to be a circle shape, but just sort of soft shapes, again, that sort of friendly, approachable effect. The fonts that are used over here, this happens to be Arial, which what's really great about Arial is although it's, you see it a lot on the web, it connects well with any PC or Mac. I mean, all PCs and Macs have it. So when NERRA goes forward to do PowerPoints and Word documents and whatnot and pass them around the various people who work at the reserves, we know that everybody will have the font Arial, and there'll be this nice consistency with the way the text looks online versus on screen and in print. It has a lot of flexibility in that respect. Button design, this would show a button in its resting state, and then as you hover over it, it would flicker to that solid color. So basically attracting the eye to click on it and, do the call to action, whatever happens to be on there. The logo at the top, what the intent here is to have, again, that watercolor kind of texture in a beautiful, bold, all caps font, which is very strong. So there's a nice contrast there. And it sits, just above this nice stacked iteration of the name. So it's compact and yet easy to read, and somewhat modular, so that, these two items could be seen together, or, if there's an application where it makes sense to pull the name, the abbreviated name, away from it, or, on the front of a t-shirt, say, and you could have this text be on the back. It's just got this nice flexibility and modularity to it. Okay, I'm going to move on to style tile number 2. Oops. This approach is really different in that, you'll see the adjectives down at the bottom: energetic, catalytic, vibrant, innovative. There's a lot of pops of color used in this one. So possible colors are these really vibrant, bright colors against sort of maybe a more neutral types of backgrounds. So your eye is really being called to whatever area content needs to be elevated. So these possible texture areas, I have a box with a stat, some statistics in it that could be layered on top of this tone-on-tone, vibrant green picture, of people, doing science in the field or whatnot. At the same time, you would still see, beautiful four-color photography, popping up all over the place, but that sort of nice contrast offers added interest, depth, energy. It has a vibrancy to it that, makes it somewhat more memorable than doing all the same type of photography treatments throughout. This possible texture down here is, it's like a geometric kind of shape to it. It could be used to fill, fact boxes or text boxes and whatnot. It does feel like water to me in a sort of a techie way, so I liked that sort of had this innovative yet natural reference to a natural element, kind of all combined into one. Again, a nice landscape image with a bright pop of color in this yellow text box sitting right on top of it. We could use all different kinds of colors from the palette to pop information off of the beautiful four-color imagery that we'll be using. The logo on this one is, again, an all caps treatment with this line work that interconnects these three characters. And the thinking here is that, that line work could represent the way that the reserves are connected to each other. It could be a waterway. It has that, interconnectivity that, without being too overpowering, but it does allude to what the work is that you guys do. I also really liked that this circle in the middle sort of made like a water droplet shape, which I thought, when you can mirror it in a graphic like that, it has more, even more purpose to it. The other thing that I thought could be a really nice way to bring in the logo and bring in that sort of really punctuated design element is to take that blue line work and use it to call out different text throughout the piece. So here I have it in the headline just to punctuate it. I've also incorporated it into the button style, so the inactive button and then the hover state is over here. So just another way to connect the design elements that are on the site through the logo and the design elements and whatnot. Okay, next style tile. This last one is intended to drive home a personality that is strong, resilient, powerful, and high impact. And you'll see lots of heavy use of color here with, again, bright colors popping off. Not quite as vibrant as the last palette, but still enough of a contrast so you're really getting an impact through the use of the palette. The textures here, lots of just solid, beautiful fills of color. The layering happens more in sort of this background grasses element rather than filling every text box with a texture. Just having that contrast in a bigger way here as a background element. The landscape image here has this, again, transparency circle, so you're still seeing through to the image, but it offers some layering and interest, if we were going to label it with, relevant information and maybe even have a little call out line. It sort of has that sort of techie, scientific quality to it. Just, again, layering and interest. The logo up at the top is an all caps treatment again, this time having what could be underwater grasses. I mean, to me, this coloration looks like something, if you went underwater and you shined a light in the environment down there, it sort of is illuminated and there's lots of layering, lots of grasses, lots of movement. It could be above water too. It doesn't necessarily have to be literal as to where the location is. It's just mostly, again, just a vibe and a flavor for the actual location of the sites and, the environments that they're in. The text boxes throughout this approach would always be on white when it's, a main body copy and a lot to read. For me, reading a lot of copy, relevant copy, works best on a lighter background. So you'd see things like headlines and, punctuated, facts and things like that on the darker color, but really that longer chunks of copy and content would always sit in these floating white boxes, which again, to me, just shows depth. It shows maybe, this is an underwater kind of situation and these white boxes are floating and hovering in that space. Button style, kind of a quiet, inactive state, and that boom, bold, green, rich color palette from the logo pops up. So those are the 3 directions, and I hope that you will find, yourself drawn to a certain one in particular, but please know that these are made to be very flexible, and just because there's something in one doesn't mean it can't be brought into another and combined.